Well, Keith Schorah is here to try to answer that. He is CEO of Syngrow, and it delivers customer experience programs across the globe. Keith.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Nearly lunch, don't worry, we're nearly there. Right, by way of a show of hands to get us going, please raise your hands if you have customer experience as part of your title or that your responsibilities include performing customer experience in your business. Thank goodness for that, I'm at the right conference. Please raise your hands if you believe that you have an unlimited budget provided to you to achieve everything that you want to do. I should recommend that you see this lady at lunchtime because she's got the answers to all of your problems. Please raise your hands if you believe that with more money allocated to your budget, you could achieve a whole lot more. Nobody. You believe you've got enough budget. Well, that's interesting. Because I'm going to talk today about quantifying the value of customer experience. I think in the brochure it's called Customer Experience. Is it still a strategic investment for CEOs? But really I'm also going to talk about the fact that for those organizations that are visionary, that believe that customers should be the central point of competitive advantage for their organizations, I'm going to talk about how you can release some budget from CEOs and board members that perhaps think they're already there. So, really, what's this customer experience program? Everybody's doing it. Everyone in this room is performing some form of customer experience. And different companies will be on different journey profiles. Some will just have started. Some will be very mature. However, what I tend to find is that every company we speak to all believe they're doing a fantastic job. And some of those companies may be doing a survey to customers once every other year and say, that's it. So the CEO says, that's great. And CEOs will put this in their annual reports and report to shareholders that they're doing a fantastic job, that we are competing on customer experience, and therefore we're at the center of our business. Others are very much more advanced. Others have got joined up processes, understand and listen to customers regularly, and act on those findings. But even then, in organizations that I'm familiar with, there are still frustrations amongst people that are trying to make a material change in an organization, irrespective of how advanced they are. Only last week, I was talking to a very well-established international mobile phone operator, and I was speaking to two very frustrated customer experience executives that ran their business, of the customer experience in the business. And the problem they had was that the company was on a cost-cutting exercise. And so even though they had initiatives that they wanted to implement, that business users were supporting and saying, I just wish I could do this. Unfortunately, they found it very, very difficult and very hard to release the purse strings in terms of being able to try and drive some material benefits that could be justified for the investment and the ROI that would come from it. And so paying lip service I call not just not doing something, but it's also almost getting there. Almost getting to the point of where you've tried to get a customer experience program going and you're starting to show some benefit, but now all of a sudden the CEO says, actually, that's enough. I've got enough now. I don't need to do anything else. I'm very happy with where I am, therefore my investment levels are going to drop on it. So let's have a look at what generally a customer experience program is all about. And if I was to try and break this down, and it's really, I'm sorry if I'm teaching my grandmother to suck eggs here, because this is Customer Experience 101. It's about listening to our customer, it's about understanding what they're saying, and it's about driving requisite actions across the business. But let's just deconstruct this a little bit and understand what that listening might be. And so we heard this morning from First Direct about talking about complaints, for example. Now, complaints are really, really interesting. We've done a lot of work with complaints, and we work with a utility. And what we found out is there is no such thing as a complaint. because a complaint is actually a service breakdown that's happened so many times that someone is so irate they feel the need to vocalize it. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to complain today to you because I'm upset with your service. Generally, they've phoned a call center, nothing's been done about it, they've had to phone back, nothing's been done, they've had to phone back, nothing's been done. Then all of a sudden, now I'm going to complain. And we found that generally, a complaint in the utilities market is a result of between 4 to 6 unresolved interactions before it actually gets to a complaint. So this now starts me thinking about, well, if that's the situation, and I'm trying to save some money, how much money is it costing us not to resolve those issues when they come into our call center? And if I could resolve them by giving good customer experience, could I bring down the cost to serve the customer? Could I actually now address an issue which might resonate with my CEO because it's got numbers associated? Of course, we've got surveys. We talk about surveys based on transactions, how someone interacted with us, and then we test that transaction. Sometimes we do relationship-based surveys to ask them to say, how do you feel? You're not necessarily transacting with us, but I know that your contract renewal's up. Let me ask you what you feel about us 3 months in advance, and then I can see what the likelihood is that you may or may not stay with us. But really, a low score in a survey is a complaint, isn't it? It's an unvocalized complaint. I'm saying I'm disappointed with you, and you need to do something about it. And then there's that whole world of social media, whole world of Twitter, whole world of Facebook, whole world of people communicating and getting people to say things on their behalf, leaders in the market creating an environment for others to follow, and that can also manifest itself in people that are disaffected or positively affected with your business. But surely the world that we're in is to try and understand this, try and get to the bottom of it, trying to drill down into what are the most important things that our customers are actually bothered about. What's the thing that's driving them? That came out in the Sony presentation. What are the drivers that they need per segment that says, this is important to me. If you get that right, guess what? I'm going to be really, really happy with you. And if I'm really, really happy with you, I'm going to stay longer and spend more money with you. But what I also find is that when you go to organizations, people have a lot of different areas that they do these things in. And you might have behavioral information. How does a customer interact with our products or services that you might overlay onto this? And so there's many, many islands of automation that really, from your point of view of making good decisions about what you want to do to drive great customer experience, you want to bring that stuff together. A lot of companies talk about next best offers. They want to be able to have, when someone's on the phone to an agent, to be able to say, what's the next best offer I can take to that person to sell them something. Now, I can think of nothing worse than someone trying to sell something to me if I've just complained or I've just given you a really low score. Nothing would upset me more. And yet people don't try to think, well, hold on a minute, can I understand the temperature of my customer, build that into my next best offer, and then instead of trying to sell them something, try and be empathetic with them. Try and resolve the issues. Try and think about what I have to do to bring them back on side so that when they actually become a loyal customer again, now they're ready to be sold to. Wouldn't it be quite a smart move that if you identified your loyalist customers and then in your next best offer is trying to sell them something, you might stand a better chance of selling something, and you can harmonize your resources in terms of how you'd make that happen. But as you can see, I'm talking about a whole lot of different moving parts here. I'm talking about a whole lot of different data silos that exist across organizations. I'm talking about bringing that together, and I'm talking about empowering people in an organization to act upon that. And so they're the tricky things, and they're the moving parts that often are very difficult in driving an effective customer experience program. The outcomes from customer experience in trying to get people to act are very much tactical based and strategic based. So tactical based, can I identify the customers that are disaffected with me and do something about it, perhaps on a one-on-one basis to bring them back on board? Not very feasible in a B2C organization with millions of customers, but can I at least train and coach my front line to do a better job at looking after them because I know what those issues are? Then strategic, can I actually have any learning an improvement in my organization that says, from all of these issues that we gather, can we ship those to different parts of the organization and create business improvement that is then going to be passed back round to the front line so that then those people can learn and they can act differently in terms of how they look after the customers. So listen, understand, and act is very straightforward. The important part is act. However, bringing it all together is difficult. What we're trying to do, why bother with all of this, we said before, is because we know that often disaffected customers are the ones that will leave an organization. Now, irrespective of what Mark Mullen said this morning about all of the people that go to First Direct are brand switchers from other banks, one thing I heard recently is that you're 10 times more likely to change your husband and wife than you are to change your bank account. However, in a lot of organizations, a lot of industries, that's not true. There are a lot of brand switchers. People will move brands based on the fact that they're disappointed or disaffected with you. But it's how to identify, is there a correlation between that disaffection and the propensity to churn or spend less? And that's one of the key elements that I suggest that organizations should get their arms around, because you've got a much more compelling argument about why you are doing what you are doing and why the actions that you are driving actually have a material benefit to the organization. And so whether it's a complainer, a net promoter detractor, someone that says it's not easy to do business with you, or someone with a low CSI score, do any of those metrics that you may be measuring, can they identify that that means that someone's going to spend less or churn with you? So that's the question that I'm going to answer today, hopefully, is how to get your CEO to sit up and take notice in terms of the actions that you've got as customer experience professionals and some of the activities that you may want to do in terms of enhancing your programs and making them more efficient and effective. And the simple answer, I believe, behind how to get a CEO to take notice is to show him the money. Okay, let's have a look at a couple of case studies that we've got just to show what's happened. This is a case study of a large brewing company. They're based out of Amsterdam, so you probably know who they are. And the CEO of the business was getting regular net promoter feedback, and it showed him that his net promoter score might have been going up on a regular basis. But he was sat in a board meeting saying, "That's really nice. Thanks for that. Can you tell me why?" "Oh, that's really nice. Thanks for that." And it never really registered on his radar what that actually meant. Now, what the company did, they said, "Well, hold on, we've got to get more attention at that board level. We've got to get more people involved." And so what they said, well, can we actually try and identify what the relationships are between our detractors and our promoters and any spend that may be happening? And they found some fascinating information. They found that their promoters, on average, were worth 2.3 times to the business more than detractors in terms of sales. They also found that promoters, actually, they had to give less discount to get the sales value and sales volumes over and above what they had with the detractors. And thirdly, they found that over time, detractors actually spent less or churned completely, whereas promoters tended to keep their spend at the same level or increase slightly. So this now, all of a sudden, caused the whole organization to wake up and take notice. Because never before had the organization had the ability to link financial, operational, and customer feedback information to prove a point. And this CEO, he woke up and he said, for the first time, I can identify something that I'm going to call in my organization customer risk. And customer risk was the value of the detractors to that organization that he knew he could now do something about managing this. And so all of a sudden the board's alive. The second great thing that happened about this is it didn't stop at board level. Because the people that sat in the operational roles within the business also got motivated by the financial value of the things that they could manage themselves. And so when you break this down into the different areas and everyone saw their own piece of the pie, they could all see what they had to do to manage their own revenue streams back up. And so the first element is managing the risk. Can I act on the customers? And they manage this by clicking on this dashboard. They click on the red part of the graph, and it brings up the reason codes of why those people are detractors, and then click on it again, and they get some nice verbatim, rich data answers, so they can kind of do some root cause analysis and drill down about what they need to fix. What they also did was say, well, hold on a minute, in that same segment of customers, if I click on the promoter one, what is it that they love about us? What is it that we have to get right? What are our brilliant basics that we have to deliver all of the time to make sure that the promoters are the promoters, but can we apply that to the detractors? Because sure, they're in the same segment based on behavior. Can I apply that to those detractors to say, these are the things we can go back into? Because we know we can get it right, because we have done. And go and do that right for the detractors. And the big upside of it is you're not just managing the risk of the detractors spending less or leaving you, you're also managing an opportunity about how you convert them to spending 2.3 times what they're currently spending. And so it was a fascinating story. The other thing it did for them was be able to prioritize actions. And so, because you can see there's different segments there, they could say, which is the segment, the biggest segment that we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck? Well, it's segment D. They've got the most customers, the most turnover, the most volume, the most profit. Why don't we put all our efforts in that for now, because we've got limited resources like any company, and make sure that we're managing the outcomes that we want on the biggest customer set that we can try and do something with. And so the showing the money to the CEO really transformed this business. And in this one region, they managed to go from number 2 market share. It's all about market share in beer. The beer market's pretty flat. Can I steal market share from someone else? They managed to go from number 2 to number 1 in terms of market share very quickly by managing the outcome properly in terms of understanding their customers and acting upon it. And it put customer centricity at the front of the business and made sure that everyone was focused on it. The next case study I'm going to show you is a large 11.5 billion euro worldwide paper and pulp company. And this was a really strange company from a B2B perspective that they really did embrace customer experience. The CEO was ex-Philips, that came from a very strong customer experience background. He moved in, he said, we're going to do this. We're going to be customer experience led. A lot of our products are consumables. Therefore, the only way we're going to be able to compete is by giving great service to our customers, and I want to make sure this all happens. And they had a worldwide initiative across different business areas. And they put in all of the things you would expect to work in a customer experience world. They listened to the customers. Every single detractor was followed up. They had root cause analysis. They had business improvement projects. Everything was working, you would think, to make things happen. However, their net promoter score was creeping up year by year, and their revenues didn't necessarily follow, nor did their profits. And they said, well, this is great because I'm actually spending quite a bit of money and effort on doing this customer experience stuff, but I don't get it. It's not working for me. And then they looked a little bit deeper at what was happening, again with an overlay of financial data. And they found something really fascinating. When they looked at their survey figures for 2010, and then looked again at the survey figures for 2011, and took out all of the detractors, and said, what's happened with those individuals, those detractors, the following year, they found these figures. They found that if detractors stayed detractors, they fell off a financial cliff. Their revenues dropped by more than a third. They found that if their detractors became more loyal and became passives, the revenues went up. But they also found that if detractors became promoters, the revenues shot up. And so what this showed the company, it was, because they're following up with every detractor, don't forget, it wasn't the fact that they followed up with every detractor, it was the mechanism and the resolution process by which they tried to resolve the issues. And so having things in place that say, I'm going to act, is all very well and good, but unless that process allows you to act to the benefit of the customer in the customer's mind, you're not necessarily doing a good job. So your resolution processes about how you deal with customers is critical in terms of how you maintain or grow the loyalty of your customers and thereby grow the revenues. Now, at the beginning, I said that their Net Promoter Score was going up, but their revenues weren't necessarily following. Now, if you looked at this picture, you'd say, well, actually, it should be. The revenue should be growing up because I'm seeing that we're dealing with our detractors and making them more loyal, therefore my Net Promoter Score should be better, therefore my revenue should be better. However, it's not a full picture. And they don't want to see the full picture in public. But if I was to show you the breakdown of the promoters, the same thing happened. So promoters a year after, if you looked at each individual one, some of them are now passives, and some of them are now detractors. And of course, the same thing was true in reverse. If I became less loyal to this company, I spent less with this organization. And so it was very, very much key for this organization to put in place what they called best operating practice. How do I identify what our promoters love about us and make that the way we have to do business? We can't take our eye off the most loyal customers that give us the majority of our revenues and profits. We should identify what they love about us and make sure that's ingrained in our DNA and that becomes part of our cultural delivery of how all of our employees work. Similarly, in this case, this story woke up the whole organization, and the whole organization is 25,000 people. And they're in every country almost in the world, delivering services to customers in lots of countries in the world. And so to do that and mobilize that against a huge organization takes a lot of effort, but tying the financial data in was the key to how you made that happen. It was also the key to how the CEO grasped this and used it to drive some of the initiatives that he wanted to do and thereby release funds to make sure that the right things happen for the right reasons in the organization. This is another example of a business that has overlays of financial data. So on the x-axis, it might not be easy to see at the back, there's NPS. On the y-axis, it's operating profit. And the bubble size is the size of the revenue size of that organization that's providing the services, that customer organization. And it provides a very good strategic map of saying, well, I know I've got to act, but how do I act? What do I want to act upon? What is it that I'm trying to chase? And of course, because we've identified previously that maybe detractors are the ones that will spend less or leave you, the big red bubble on the top left-hand side, who are very, very profitable and provide good revenues, might be an environment to say, maybe we should target our efforts there first. The green bubble at the bottom right-hand side says, these guys aren't profitable at all. How the heck do we deal with that? They love us. Maybe they love us because we're giving too much discount. How do we actually deal with the people that are promoters that love us, but actually we want to cut our cost base to try and get them above a profit line again? And the guys bottom left, who are that little red group, don't turn over any revenue, negative profit, shout at you all the time, maybe you want to decide they're better going to your competitors. But what the drill down for this was to say, how can I make a real value decision? They had a drill down that says, I'm actually interested in what my revenue was against budget and what my share of wallet is. I want to see where my share of wallet's going. And they could see from a trend that the share of wallet that they were aspiring to in these customers wasn't what they'd set out either as a budget or where they wanted to end up. And they wanted to grow the share of wallet in terms of how they deliver to them. But then they said, well, what do I have to do? Well, this company were very innovative to say, the organizations that we deal with are huge. We have lots of contact points in that organization. Why don't we try and identify which ones of the contacts in that organization are positively disposed towards us, promoters, or negatively disposed towards us, detractors, and then set an action plan based on the verbatims and the scores that we get against the detractors that our people can go and address the issues directly. And again, it was the financial overlay of data that allowed this company to prioritize its actions and understand what it wanted to do to make sure that it actually acted in the right way based on what the customers were asking for and what the needs were once we were identified. Another thing they managed to do was to try and extract from the customers where they were relative to their competitors. And some empirical work that we did, we figured out that if you can identify where you are compared to your competitors and order them from most important to least important, all you have to work on to keep customers are the top 4 or 5 issues. Focus in on the bits that are the most important for the organization. And that had a really big effect in terms of how this company allocated its resources, how it allocated costs and people and time into specific issues that they now knew were the most important, and they could tie back to a financial outcome. And not only that, because they knew the size of the financial outcome, they could justify any improvements they wanted and say, will I get an ROI? If I'm going to invest $1 million, will it give me 10 back? Because I know the value of this customer set is going to move in a certain direction if I get these things right. But if you remember the green bubble in the bottom right-hand corner that said, what can we do to reduce cost? Well, what we also know is if you look at the bottom 5 or 6, it's actually more like 10 in reality, issues that are not important to the customer, they're the things that you can start to reduce your resources in terms of managing. And so only focusing on the important things, and you're not going to upset the customers or affect their loyalty or the longevity and lifetime value to your organization by reducing resources in the areas that are not important to them. And when you look at loyalty metrics, by the way, they are relative. Whether you're using NPS, CSI, effort score, they're a relative score. It's nice to see a trend going up, but if your trend going up is still half the speed that your competitors are going up, you're really not doing very well. And so wherever you can, try and make sure that you get relative scoring so you know exactly where you stand compared to your competitors in the market in which your customers are in. It also, by the way, on that point, it's specific to the market. Don't compare Germany with the UK. Don't compare consumer products with value-add products, etc. Make sure that when you're drilling this data down, you don't homogenize your business. Your business shouldn't be homogenized. A lot of people here from large organizations. There's a lot of different value add that the customers perceive. There's a lot of different customer segments. You need to make sure when you're doing these comparisons and driving the actions that they're based on specific segments that you know truly in that segment, these are their needs. There's a trade-off in that in terms of putting the pots too big or putting them too small. If you put them too big, you're too homogenized and you're not working on the right issues. If you put them too small, you've got too many and you haven't got the resources to manage them. But only your organization can you understand what they are and then figure that out to make a logical decision about what that needs to be in terms of the actions that you want to drive in those specific segments. I talked before about trying to drive the right actions, about strategic actions and about tactical actions. And this is a model that I think describes that fairly well. On the left-hand side, we have a small circle that talks about tactical actions. And these would vary in terms of what your organization's like, if it's a B2C with a big call center, or if it's B2B where you maybe have account managers servicing customers. But the tenet is understand what the customers think, whether that's social media, whether it's complaints, whether it's behavior, whether it's surveys, and make sure you consolidate that information so it's understandable. So you can actually get to it and you can see it and you can look at the segments and you can have an overall picture and that the CEO can see his view of the world and he can see the financial values. Make sure that you understand what that is. But then when you start acting on it, you're acting on it on a per customer level. And then you're getting back to the customers that are upset with you, disaffected, low scorers or complainers. And as I said before, that might vary whether you're B2B or B2C. In a lot of instances, in a B2B world, you can get back to nearly everybody. Or you may choose not to because of the fact that some of the customers might not be of high value to you, so you can segment those out. And you can say, I actually only want to deal on the ones that either they're good opportunities or high value customers. And that would be your business decision. But that tactical action is really, really important in terms of how you manage the disaffected customers that you may have. And as I mentioned before, it's about how you resolve the issues. So it's very, very important that when you've been to try through a process of understanding the customer and fixing an issue, that you ask them how satisfied they are with that fixing of the issue. Because that will give you an indicator to say, are we doing a good job, or are we actually failing in our resolution processes, and those detractors maintain to be detractors and then spend less or fall away. But one critical thing you need to do in that tactical space is make sure that anybody that has a frontline interaction with the customer, anyone that the customer can interact with on a customer journey, has the coaching and training based on the information that you get that says, let's stop doing these bad things. Let's make them go away. And I think that the Sony guy alluded to that. But then once you've actually got these tactical actions in place, it's important that you understand the strategic initiatives that you want to take as a business to make sure that you're getting everything hooked up. And I see this as a big gap in a lot of organizations that we work with in terms of how do they mobilize their resources to understand what to act upon and how to make sure that these things work for the benefit of the customer. And often you've got to go into some type of thing that says, look, we've identified the fact that something structural is wrong. We're getting low scores for late deliveries 100 times across Eastern Europe in any one month. How do you link that into something that says, I want to do a root cause analysis of that, and I want to create a business improvement project and then get a best operating practice. I've fixed it. Now this is the new way of working, but then feed that back to the front line. And I think that's one of the tricks that a lot of companies sometimes struggle with in terms of that ability to take an organization that's working with customers, but then take a step back and have a cross-functional team look at what's necessary to make these problems go away forever. Because sometimes you can get caught in a tactical loop of keep fixing the problem, but it's the same problem and the same problem and the same problem. Taking a step back and having a visionary view on it often allows you to do those things. So it's a nice thing to look at the processes that support customer experience in a business. However, processes imply one thing and one thing only, is that there's people involved. And so we've talked about the fact that we can motivate all of our people and we can bring them together to a common cause based on trying to drive some financial value that can be identified. But this is a process that I saw used at the utility that I mentioned before, and they used something called commitment-based management. And this utility managed to cut down its complaints by 80%. And you can imagine the cost saving of reducing 80% of your complaints across an organization. And they win service awards year after year in terms of what they've done in terms of providing good service to the customers. And really, it's a very straightforward process. They said, let me identify what happens when someone interfaces with us. When a customer interfaces, the customer's the green guy, the frontline employee is the red guy. When someone interfaces to us, we generally make a promise. Someone's phoning up because they want an issue resolved, and that frontline person wants to make a promise. And we found that in that promise, in that conversation that happens, there's those 4 parts of that conversation that generally you want your guy to get right. Because if they get those 4 bits right, they're going to be able to be confident in terms of making a good promise back to that customer, and no one's going to let them down. But the problem we have is the fact that that frontline person might not be the person that's going to deliver the final promise to the customer. There might be some fulfillment in the organization that you're reliant on someone else to deliver on your behalf. And what confidence does that frontline operative have to say, I believe fully that my back office will deliver the promise that I've actually made to that customer? I think you can all recognize it because sometimes when you're talking to people, people will say to you, I'll get back to you as soon as possible. We might think that might be 5 minutes, but that customer agent might think it might be 24 hours or 10 days. And that's why you call back, and that's why you call back again, and that's why you get a complaint. And so making an emphatic promise and having the understanding that the business behind you is backing you up is a very important component in terms of aligning people around how you deal with customers. And I think we've all seen process designs that have had all triangles on them and squares and lines and everything else, and you go and sit in the workshops and it's got brown paper on the wall and you draw on it and then it goes away and then you forget about it and you get on with your business. My encouragement is to try and design processes as conversations. Try and understand what people are saying at the front line. Try and understand whatever that interaction is, whether that's a sales guy, a fulfillment agent, an agent in a call center, whether it's a self-serve automated portal environment that you're running, whatever that promise is, try and make sure that you can live with that promise in the organization. And that people understand that the fulfillment, when they're making a promise, will be backed up by the people that are behind them. Because if you get that bit right, irrespective of any technology, irrespective of anything else you do, your company will see benefits. Okay, so really that's me. I finished a bit in advance. I think you might be happy with that because the lunch might be a bit sooner. Bringing these pieces together, I identified the basic tenet, listen, understand, and act. I think we get that point. The tricks in how you act, the tricks in what you do and how you bring it together. It's really useful if you can tie some customer feedback or loyalty metrics to financial data. And I know, because we've looked in lots of different companies, it's not easy. And you've got to look sometimes at a lot of different things before you find the bit that works for you. But when you find the bit that works for you, it's amazing how transformational that can be in terms of getting people to sit up and take notice and do stuff. And then also, that last point I made was you're going to have processes that you're going to put in place, but try and make sure that your front office and your back office are aligned perfectly based on the fact that they can trust to make promises to customers. And I believe that if you did this, your CEO will take notice. Even though you don't need it, you might get more budget. And I think your companies will benefit as a result. Thank you.